That was 2 years ago. So here we are. So I am of the view that a report which is done by a public authority, a public agency by public servants using taxpayers' dollars and resources ought to be made public.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So Mr. Wells may be referring to some report which NICWAN themselves will do, but he has no authority to tell the Ministry of Energy or the OSH agency how they should treat with a report.
Mm-hmm. Now, in that particular instance, Mr. Malcolm Wells is also reported as stating that an appropriate synopsis will be actually released to the public, not going into much details. An appropriate synopsis, what does that mean? In fact, could there be any level of trust and confidence given the fact that the explosion of April 2021, we still don't know the findings of that investigation? Is an appropriate synopsis really something that is acceptable?
Well, that's his point of view. I think he might be referring to a report that they would have done themselves. I assume what he's referring to as an appropriate synopsis would be like an executive summary or something like that, right? But the bigger issue here is that safety is, of course, the cornerstone of the energy sector, of the manufacturing sector, of the construction sector. And for many years, I think Trinidad and Tobago had been at the forefront of HSC best practice. And we passed the OSH Act in 2004, which replaced a very outdated piece of law called the Boilers and Factories Ordinance of 1947. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have now safety practices in Trinidad and Tobago have begun to slide, and I think complacency has set in. And this is not a comment specific to NICWAN, but it's an industry-wide comment. We've had the Aria Divers accident of February 2022, and one gets the impression that we are allowing, as complacency is in nature of Trinidad and Tobago after a while. And I think there's a need to really revisit the OSH Act and to revisit HSC policy in Trinidad and Tobago. One hopes that the Paria Divers accident report will be used by the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago to inform how they practice HSC going forward, mm-hmm. right? That report, of course, I'm not sure, I've lost track of when that report ought to be submitted, right? But it's tragic that a young man has lost his life in the way in which he lost his life, and it's really, causing us to relook at HSC. There is a Courtney McNish, at the time, he's an industrial relations consultant. At the time of the Paria Divers incident, he had said that corporate manslaughter ought to be part of the legal landscape. As far as occupational health and safety law goes, it is on the statute books in the UK, and we like to aspire to UK type law. So I think that and I'm making a call this morning for the government to revisit, if they have not already started, to revisit the OSH Act and to update the OSH Act in keeping with evolutionary changes in safety law in the UK in particular.
Mm-hmm. Well, another instance, Mr. Ramrine, is that the Occupational Safety and Health Agency has served a shutdown notice to NICWAN while it conducts its investigation. And even Mr. Wells is stating that how NICWAN is up to par with all OSHA standards. That being said, could we say that with absolute confidence? There's been questions regarding even the safety of the equipment and the facilities that NICWAN operates, questions about even the fire extinguishers, whether or not they were available, how long it took an ambulance to get, which is a separate issue actually. But all of those things, who are the ones that are generally responsible for enforcing OSHA regulations? Because it seems as though OSHA standards are there, according to Mr. Malcolm Wells. But then again, all these questions being raised tends to lead to some people scratching their heads.
Well, there are three agencies that come to mind. One is the Ministry of Energy under the Petroleum Act and the Petroleum Regulations. And the other one would be the OSH agency. And the third one would be fire services. To some extent, there may be others, but generally those three are the three that have to have, robust oversight of this type of petrochemical operation. With regard to ultimately it is really the remit of they ought not to be reactive. They ought to be proactive. So, we should not be waiting for a tragedy to strike, then to, come to assess the deficiencies and so on of a particular plant. Again, we go back to the 2021 incident, which was an extraordinary incident. That incident was an explosion which rocked Marabella and was heard as far as Vistabella and so on. So that at that point in time, it ought to have been made public, the cause of the accident. I mean, people in the industry have a fair idea what happened, but there is a need for transparency when it comes to these things. So the other point I wanted to make is the issue of the burns unit. Now, we operate a heavily industrialized economy in Trinidad and Tobago. My understanding is that up to the time we left office in 2015, there was a functioning burns unit at the Augustus Long Hospital. I am told that has closed down. So there's no burns unit in the Augustus Long Hospital. We had to send this young man to Colombia for treatment. I mean, that obviously, in any courtroom scenario, analyzing the causes of his death, one would have to posit that a flight to Colombia, which probably would take a half day or something like that, may have been a contributory factor to his eventual death. I mean, I'm sure you would agree. I mean, if you've been badly burnt and you have to be air ambulance to Colombia, I mean, that's time that you're not being treated and so on. So we have to question the sort of resource that we have with regard to treating burns and so on. This is a heavily industrialized country. And my understanding too is that Point Lisa's companies had also used the burns unit at Augustus Long. And it's just another one of those things that fell through the cracks when Petrotrin was shut down in 2018. So we have no burns unit, no functional burns unit, I am advised, at the Augustus Long hospital. That hospital was used for COVID, yes, during the COVID pandemic and so on. So that is something which to me is very concerning. And again, you talked about the ambulance. I don't have all the facts on the time taken for the ambulance, but I mean, when one is damaged, when somebody is damaged the way he was damaged in that fire, I mean, time obviously is of the essence.
But Mr. Amrine, also to consider is the role, I suppose, of Massey Energy Engineered Systems, of which Mr. Ramkisoon was an employee of. Does Massey Energy, do they have the power to conduct their own investigation? Being it's a private institution, is there any obligation at all on their part to release any findings or reports if they wanted to do so?
Well, I think the obligation to make findings public really resides with the public authorities. Massey, of course, could do their own internal thing, but I just wanted to, in the whole spectrum of liability, and when it comes to a fatal accident like this, the role of all parties involved have some, when you look at the case law coming out of the United States and coming out of the United Kingdom, the company which hired the subcontractor in accordance with the case law in the UK. I don't want to call the name of the case to get too legal, but it's a case called Woodland versus Essex County Council. It says that the case law says that the company has liability in that the company had a duty of care to exercise oversight over the subcontractor. In the Macondo accident in the US Gulf of Mexico, all the parties involved were deemed by one particular court, because there were many court matters in that accident. All the parties involved were deemed to have some component of liability. So it was apportioned to BP, to Transocean, to Halliburton, and so on. So, I mean, ultimately, we have courts of law, and I mean, I don't know if people will, take court action and so on, but I mean that's what we have courts for. But it's really, I just want to reiterate the point that in my view, and I've been operating in this sector since I left the government in 2015, there has been a dropping of the ball across the board when it comes to safety. There is a sort of seeping in of a kind of lax attitude across the board, not specific to NICOAN with regard to safety. And these things are now manifesting themselves as fatalities, as accidents, and so on. I believe there was a fatality involving a worker or two in the construction sector a few months ago. So it is time, I think, for Trinidad and Tobago to refresh that OSH Act, and it's time for the OSH agency to become a bit more bullish with how they implement the law that they are, challenged to implement.
Mr. Amrine, in your opinion, do you think that Trinidad and Tobago still has, do we still have actually the expertise for international best practice and standards? You've just mentioned, in your opinion, the level of safety and the practice of safety that has been dropping. Do we still have the expertise to ensure that international best practice and standards are executed?
Yeah, we do. If you, and I made this point on another show, if you look at BP and Shell's operations in Trinidad, you will never hear anything like this happening in their operations. And are their operations less dangerous? No, they're not. Their operations are probably more dangerous because they're dealing with offshore environment and helicopters and boats and so on, right? But they have a very almost religious approach to safety. It is really their cornerstone. And they have, safety for them is bread and butter. So it has not slipped there, and those companies are, staffed and run by Trinidadians in the main. In fact, I could tell you that as far as I'm aware, BP has Trinidadians who have served in health and safety positions globally. And they have, so they know what best practices, and some of them have come back to Trinidad. So it really is being upheld by the multinationals, because if they have accidents, there are consequences to them internationally, and their share price drops, and they value their reputation. So it is possible to uphold it, but I am saying that I'm seeing it slip from my experience, probably in other aspects of the energy sector, but it is, to me, something which has to be rebooted, something which has to be refreshed. And I think that really starts with the reformation of the OSH Act, and the looking at introducing things like corporate manslaughter into the statute books and so on.
I'd like to just quickly go back to the incident in April of 2021. Residents and environs of Malabar, they actually have been pleading for answers since then.
Oh, that's Marabella.
Yes, my apologies, Marabella. They have been asking for answers, and at this point in time, it seems as though it's fallen on deaf ears. Is there that level of thinking now that government is seeking the interests of shareholders of this private company? Rather than
again, we come back to, we want to be a first world country. We aspire to be a first world country. Do you think that could happen in a first world country? You think somebody could have a plant operating in some part of Houston, Texas, and there's an explosion and the surrounding communities never get answers, never get reassurances? It will not happen in the first world. In the UK, there was a very significant accident event, the Grenfell fire, which was a fire involving an apartment, a high-rise apartment building, and a number of people died, including children and so on, died in that fire. I have been following what has been happening with the investigations in the Grenfell fire. People have been charged in England across the board, from the Royal Borough of Chelsea and Kensington, all the way down to the fire services in London. People have been charged. So in serious countries, serious action is taken. So something like that could not happen in a developed country. And I think that the people living in Marabella, who are the fence line of what was the refinery, obviously at a very minimum deserve some sort of reassurance, some sort of explanation, some sort of, again, reassurance that that wouldn't happen again.
Certainly. Mr. Ramnaran, this is where we'll actually have to pause on this particular conversation, probably have to continue it another time when more information comes out. But thank you very much for your time this morning. And, well, I suppose we'll wait to see what happens next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shah. Have a good day.
You too, sir. Take care. Former Minister of Energy Kevin Ramnaran this morning as we are discussing the unfortunate death of Kevin Lane Ramkissoon following a burn sustained in a flash fire at Naikwan's plant in Pointe-a-Pierre. Mr. Malcolm Wells, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Naikwan, has stated that any report coming from an investigation will be held as private and confidential. He has assured that a synopsis, an appropriate synopsis of the findings, however, will be shared. Mr. Ramnaran this morning discussing that, suggesting that that is in reference to any investigation on Naikwan's part. However, anything coming from the Occupational Safety and Health Agency or the Minister of Energy, well, that should be made public. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll get into some more conversations. Stay tuned to the program.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola.
Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WASN,
the content capital. Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us. This morning, once more, we're focusing on our ecosystems here in Trinidad and Tobago, specifically environmental sustainability. Well, we are a small island and we have a fragile ecosystems. This morning, we're focusing on whether or not we are actually doing our part, if there's enough efforts to ensure that there is environmental sustainability. I'm joined by Ms. Cyan Cuffy-Young. She's an eco-waste management expert. She's with me via Zoom. Hello, Ms. Cuffy-Young. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. I'll start the conversation by asking, is there science that is supported through leadership and empathy for the environment here in Trinidad and Tobago, even as we try and promote ecological citizenship?
That's a very loaded question. So let me see if I can kind of break it apart and keep it as simple as possible. So in Trinidad and Tobago, I would say, and this is my personal opinion, that we are still beginning to understand the importance of what environmental sustainability is. There have been several initiatives that have come on board. However, they are either quite disconnected or they're one-off, but there is, in my personal opinion, a lack of a consistent program where the environment is concerned, starting all the way from the schools program, all the way up to dealing with adults, individuals, and the business community especially. I think now the conversation is beginning to change for us to really adopt and incorporate, because now we're talking about things like the circular economy. Now we're talking about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So we're having these conversations now as the mechanism to encourage persons to think long-term, to think incorporating into process, incorporating it into your daily habits. And that is where true environmental sustainability sits. It has to become a part of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there a displayed commitment to environmental concerns, or is it often left up to the public and citizens to uphold the importance of our natural resources?
I would say, and I remember being on a radio program and stating this very, very clearly, for a long time, a lot of the blame has been placed on the consumer to solve some of the environmental issues, but that is far from the truth, and that's far from what needs to happen. Every organization, whether it's at the government level, whether it's at the individual level, whether it's at the community level, we all have a critical role to play when it comes to environmental sustainability, or whether it's at the business community level. So no emphasis, or no one emphasis, sorry, should be just placed on the consumer. And that's how it has been. Well, you all have to figure out what you're doing with your items, and you all have to figure out your recycling habits. So you all have to figure out how to compost. But if the mechanisms are there, so there are things like extended producer responsibility, which allows the manufacturers to be responsible for whatever product they generate from the beginning of its life to its end. And that principle has been incorporated into the circular economy of which I currently sit as a member of the National Mirror Committee with the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. So it's critical to recognize that every level has a role to play. Consumers are not only responsible for solving the country's environmental problems. If the infrastructure is not in place, and that is the physical infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, if there are not many opportunities for people to engage in environmental behavior, then what do you expect them to do? I tell people, even though this is my passion, this is my work, this is my life's work, I too am a consumer, and I too get frustrated when the options to me are so limited. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Sometimes I just feel like, you know what? I'm just not doing anything else. I'm just tired, you know. And that is coming from somebody who has been in this industry for almost 2 decades. So it's critical for us to realize and understand that everybody's role is important. No one group can sit by and say, well, it's left to the other one to solve. We all have to really get our hands in there, get our feet in there, and do our part.
Now, I appreciate that response. Every single level here in Trinidad and Tobago, whatever your status, you have an important role to play in this topic of environmental sustainability. I've asked a question with regards to this public having to uphold certain standards, but you also mentioned something there with regards to corporate responsibility. Has there been a level of inaction? Because you mentioned also physical infrastructure, you mentioned legal infrastructure, but has there been a lack of action for the very same reason that you also mentioned? You know what, I just don't feel like doing this.
So in Trinidad and Tobago, there are no, outside of the waste management rules, and I'm talking specifically about waste here, outside of the waste management rules that the Environmental Management Authority passed last year, there is no real push for the business community to do much else. Now, the purpose of those rules is to push the business community. And so it is important for those conversations to continue to happen. But I remember being told by an organization, and they said, well, Sean, I'm not going to do anything until the government does more. Mm-hmm. And it saddened me to hear that comment, but I also understand the position that they're in, because if they're doing a lot on their own and there is no incentive, because let's just be real, Keaton, right? There are, in other parts of the world, we have incentives and disincentives. We have mechanisms or principles of persuasion to get people to do the behaviors that we want to encourage, or to discourage the behaviors that we do not want. Trinidad and Tobago is not exempt from those principles. And so as somebody who has also done work in behavior change and studied behavior change, it's important that we recognize and to use those principles to encourage people to engage. One of the critical things that I've said and I've realized is that we're completely disconnected. You know, you are not separate from nature, but somehow along the way, we've become separate. We feel like, that climate change thing too big, or all of that talk, the government talking about that again, that's none of my business. But we have to realize that this is the country that we choose to live in at in this moment, and we have to do our part. And so whether it's at the individual level, whether it's at the government level, whether it's at the business level, we all have to get in there. We can't just sit back and wait for, so we'll fold our arms and we'll say, you know, I'll wait for the government. Or we'll fold our arms and say, I'll wait for the business community. We can't afford to do that. As Caribbean states, as Caribbean islands, small island developing states, we are some of the most affected islands by the effects of climate change. And I know for a lot of people that climate change conversation is still very big, so I don't want to go too deep into that. But recognizing that we have, the time for inaction is gone. Let me just say it as simple as that. The time for inaction has gone. We cannot continue to sit idly by and wait on someone else to tell us what to do. Mm-hmm. If we are in the business, ask ourselves, how is what I am doing affecting the natural environment? Am I taking away from it without replacing? Am I destroying? Am I not doing enough? And if you answer yes to any of those questions, then do something about it.
Ms. Kavian, let me just interject, and a very valid point you've raised. Has that disconnect between mankind and nature probably the core reason for our indiscipline? And if so, how do we reconnect to the understanding that mankind, because we're speaking specifically of Trinidad and Tobago, has a very important role in any ecosystem that exists?
So the simple answer to that question, Keaton, is yes. The reason why things are the way they are, in my personal opinion, is because we are disconnected. It's because we feel that nature is separate. It's on the side. It's not something we need to think about right now. Now, your second part of the question, how do we reconnect? That will take a multi-pronged approach that cannot be solved by just the technical people in waste management. It requires us looking at psychology principles. It requires us to look at environmental principles. It requires us to look at the social side, look at the environment. So the pillars of what sustainability is, which means economic, social, so people, planet, and profit. That's the easy way to remember it. The 3 Ps, right, is critical in order for us to be able to reconnect again. So how can we make the people connected? How can the economy benefit from what we're doing so that the economy is also connected? How can we preserve nature's resources in a way that is long-term? Because that's literally what sustainability is. You know, just making sure it exists for generations to come. And so it would require a multi-pronged approach. It cannot be solved by a singular entity. As we say in the environmental sector, especially for issues like waste management and climate change, they are wicked problems. And the reason why they are wicked is because they require a multidisciplinary approach to solve them. So until we recognize that just environmental information, just putting environmental information alone out there is not going to work, until we realize that just focusing on the people and we're not connecting nature is not going to work, we're going to, as we say here, we're spinning top in mud. We're just moving around in circles and nothing is going to happen. So we have to recognize that we have to work together. We have to call in all of the different players, civil society, the government, the business community, and us as individuals, and use the various disciplines that we have. We have universities with well-educated people who can assist in this fight, because that is literally what it is. But we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago. They're talking about the land of steel pan and calypso. We're talking about discouraging people from the simple act of littering, which still happens in the 21st century, which I cannot understand. But that's because they're disconnected. So we must reconnect.
Ms. Sankafia, we often hear a term that is utilized now in every aspect of any conversation that deals with the environment, and that is adaptation. You know, we are trying to adapt. We're working to adapt. Our goal is to adapt. It has that mindset of adaptation in itself, probably acceptance of defeat, that, listen, we've probably left it too late.
Some people would say yes, that it's like accepting defeat. And some people will say no, it's just a critical it's just something, it's a critical activity that needs to be done. So we can't, for us, we still have to mitigate and adapt, because we are affected by certain things. However, what our mitigation activities need to look like, it's more proactive than reactive. Stop waiting for the incidences to happen, and then we decide, oh, we need to fix that. If you know that that's a problem, fix it in advance. Don't wait until the end, because we tend to be a very reactive society. So we have to do both. We have to mitigate and we have to adapt. We have to ensure that we are prepared to withstand whatever we may come against in terms of nature, hurricanes, tropical storms, earthquakes, whatever that natural disaster may be. So we have to adapt, we have to become more resilient, but at the same time, you also have to understand that there is some level of mitigation that needs to happen. So, but allow that mitigation to be proactive rather than reactive.
Well, my final question to you, Ms. Sain-Kafiang, this morning is, it's simple. We are part of many different pacts, such as the 30 by 30 Global Ocean Alliance. There is legislation that is sitting before Parliament with regards to further protections for the environment and environmental sustainability. Is it that we just are now becoming lazy? What's the point, in other words, of actually being a part of all these pacts? Does signing a piece of paper really lead to anything?
And I hear the yeah, I hear the sigh in your voice, Keaton. But it's a very real question, because you feel like a lot of people in this country, like, why do we still sign on to agreements? Like, what's the purpose of that? That's just signing on to a piece of paper and then it's just going to sit there in the ministry and we're not going to do anything. So what is the point? I hear you and I understand why you've asked that question, because it's a very, very real question. What, to me, what signing on those agreements is that it is Trinidad and Tobago giving its commitment to do better. And for us to say, okay, this is what we have done. Now, the flip side to that is how fast are we doing it? So we have, because I always say sometimes we have the willingness, but we don't have the ability. We talk a lot, but there is very little action, right? So we have to ensure that we're moving beyond just signing of these agreements. To me, the signing that's the beginning, that's not the end. And for a lot of the organizations, sometimes it feels like that's the end. My issue is how long it takes for us to bring things into effect. That's my real issue. My issue is not the signing, because the signing shows our commitment to do better. My issue is the lack of action, or the slow action towards getting things done. And so it really starts, so it's both a top-down and a bottom-up approach, where there's more, it has to just it has to be more than just talk. We can't just keep talking about the environment, and we had to do this, and look at the, the areas that were flooded recently. That's going to continue to happen. And one of the guys I was listening to on an interview said, we have spoken to the powers that be, the Ministry of Works, whomever, about this issue since it happened the last time. But nothing has happened between the last time and now. And that, to me, is where the critical issue is. Why is the action so slow? Why is there inaction? If the people who are being affected are telling you, this is what we need. And so I've found that sometimes those who are affected, they know what they need to know. But for some reason, we think, nah, you all don't know. Let's wait for the professionals to come in and tell you what's going on. But these people live it, they breathe it, they understand what the issues are. They among themselves have their own technical know-how. If they don't, they'll find somebody who does. So to diminish how they feel, I mean, that is inherently wrong. So Keaton, my main issue is not so much not the signing of the agreement itself, but the slow action or the often inaction to get things done. What is holding us back? Is it that it's not a priority? Is it that we need to do more? How do we do more? So those are the questions that we have to ask, because I am all for action. That's why I am doing the kind of work that I'm doing, because I refuse to sit and wait for the government to tell me what to do. I decided, you know what, I'm taking this on. I'm passionate about this work. I love education. I love waste management. So I'm going to do something about it. And I'm actually seeing the fruits of my labor. But I continue to do things like this, Keaton, continue to have conversations with people like yourself and talk to the general public, because we need to hear it. and to understand that there are solutions that exist that we probably may not have even thought about, but to really have an open conversation, to ask the hard questions, just like you asked me this morning, to ask the hard questions to move us from point A to point B, because we do not have the time to sit by and just let nothing happen. Because I always say it's not always about doing things better, but sometimes we simply need to do better things. And the time to do those better things is now.
Ms. Anne Young, thank you very much for joining me this morning. The time to do better things is now. I mean, I'd make the argument the time to do better things passed years ago. But, I mean, there's still probably an opportunity that exists to grab it while the window is still, well, it's just a bit open. But for now, Ms. Young, this is where we're going to have to pause. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And thank you for actually your role and your part in educating the public and even your action. I mean, your sigh was a little bit bigger than mine, but you're actually working on it. So that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keaton, for having me. I appreciate it. Have an awesome day.
Have a great one. Take care. I was Mr. San Young this morning speaking about this 21st century challenge that is with regards to preservation and environmental sustainability here in Trinidad and Tobago. I suppose that message, you know, don't wait for the government to tell you what to do. Sometimes a simple little thing like that plastic bottle, which just refreshed yourself from the hot day, dispose of it in a bin, whether it be recycling or trash bin. Whatever it is, you can do your part, and we should be doing our part. Sometimes I'm absolutely appalled as to see the indiscipline and the lack of empathy as it relates to environmental sustainability here in Trinidad and Tobago. Anyway, just before we break for news on the hour, we have a regional update to do. Actually, we're going to start with Greendot because it's with regards to the National Democratic Congress. Their administration actually has just celebrated 1 year in office following that rather surprising victory of the elections. In fact, they've recorded several achievements. Delivering a national address last week, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell highlighted such achievements and shared insights into plans to further development in Greendot. Furthermore, the Prime Minister has given his assurance that outstanding issues of regularization of workers and pension reform are still high on the government's agenda. This regional update from Greendot.
In November last year, the ruling administration honored its campaign promise and paid out over $70 million in retroactive pension and gratuity to retired public servants. However, the promise to regularize contract workers, creating one public service with everyone appointed by the Public Service Commission, has been set back by issues which the government says threatened to cause irreparable damage to the economy and the future of pension payments. Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell provided an update on the steps his government has taken towards resolving these long-standing issues during its first year in office.
Monthly payment for all government workers and pensioners will extend to all statutory bodies and government or state-owned entities. He also gave an update on the regularization of workers and pension reform, two issues which are still high on the government's agenda.
The matters of the regularization of workers and pension reform are still high on the government's agenda. I'm happy to report that the draft regularization framework is now at an advanced stage, with rollout expected in the latter half of this year and the start of 2024. And the Pension Reform Committee is actively working on a new public service pension plan, which should be completed by January of 2024. Nationwide consultations on the minimum wage, with a view to amending the minimum wage order, are still underway. And I call on the unions to display more leadership in these discussions.
With the recertification of the SEED program under the Ministry of Social Development, the government was able to add 500 new beneficiaries to the SEED program in April and expanded the program to include Carriacou and Pitimatnik for the first time. And they are now in the advanced stage of the negotiations to acquire 90 acres of land for a new hospital in the Calavini area. Negotiations are expected to be completed in the coming weeks. He also highlighted areas his government will be focusing on in the future, including moving to renewable energy.
Bold decisions which would affect our trajectory for the next 25 years. Do we continue to invest in fossil fuels? Or do we make the decision now to commit to renewable energy and invest instead in wind and solar farms? Carriacou and Pitimatnik provide an ideal location to test the feasibility of this avenue. Do we continue to educate our nation's youth in the way we have been educated for centuries, static, in a standard classroom? Or do we invest in technology now that helps our students to be at the forefront of advancement in artificial intelligence? These are the nature of the questions and the decisions that we intend to address soon.
In his closing remarks, the Prime Minister said, based on what was achieved in 1 year, he is convinced, and I quote, that as a people we can achieve any goal if we work together.
Context of events, the Defense Minister, Sergei Shoigu, the arch enemy.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Chinese companies seeking $300 million for halted aluminum plant. Tobago Business Chamber claims Tobago operating on handouts from central government. Young boss sets up GoFundMe for funeral expenses. And internationally, Fox News names Jesse Waters will replace ousted star Tucker Carlson. Now for the details. $300 million US. That's how much a Chinese company is seeking in damages after TNT cancelled plans to complete an aluminum plant here. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, speaking at a PNM convention on Sunday night, said the government is now treating with arbitration where the Chinese company is now pressing its claim legally for US $300 million after the previous government, the People's Partnership, had put on halt to the multi-million-dollar aluminum complex that would have produced 125,000 tons per year. Prior to the presentation of the budget, head of the Tobago Business Chamber Martin George called the THA budget presentation as an illusion, as every year they approach central government with a begging bowl, but are given considerably less than requested and have to make do. He said that what Tobago operates on now are mere handouts by the central government. The chamber had noted this does nothing to encourage self-sustainability of the sister island. George stated that there is no accountability or fiscal management of funds that seems to be required. A well-known social media personality was shot dead while seated in a car in the car park of the Trincity Mall on Saturday, June 24th. The victim has been identified as Kevin Otley, aka Young Boss, and the River Witch, also known as Kevin Solomon and Young Boss. Now, close family have set up a GoFundMe account to offset funeral expenses. On the GoFundMe account reads, on behalf of the Robertson family, we were granted permission to create this GoFundMe. The statement continues by saying that this heinous act left his 71-year-old mother, family and friends and his beloved Young Nation family in disbelief and tremendous pain. Currently on the GoFundMe account, there's a total of $345 US. Internationally, Fox News has announced that longtime network personality Jesse Waters will replace ousted star Tucker Carlson. The departure of Carlson, the most watched cable news host in U.S. history, had led to a downturn in the channel's primetime ratings. Waters, 44, joined the network as a production assistant in 2002 and has anchored the 7 p.m. time slot since the start of this year. Fox News said in April that it was parting ways with Carlson. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
Fan Zone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, is for all of us in public.
Welcome back to AM Prime, and thank you very much for staying with us this morning. My final conversation surrounds the SME marketplace, raising capital and fostering development. To have this conversation, I'm pleased to be joined in studio by the Chief Executive Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange Limited, Ms. Eva Mitchell. Good morning, Ms. Mitchell.
Good morning, Keaton. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Pleasure.
And to start the conversation, get an idea of precisely what is the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange? Because people might think, listen, this is where I'm going to go buy and sell. Is it just more than that?
Oh, it's much more than that. So, good morning, viewers, and thank you again for having me on the show. So, essentially, you know, a lot of people, especially Trinidadians, we think, and Tobagonians, we think of the stock market as some abyss, a scary abyss that, you know, basically eats investors alive. But it's actually not that scary, right? If you understand the stock market, you understand the stock exchange, the role of the stock exchange, and you understand how to properly use it, it can actually turn out to be a pathway to a magnitude of wealth for you. It actually adds to your financial stability, and it helps you build wealth for a lifetime. So in order to understand the stock exchange, you'd have to understand the stock market. And in order for you to understand the stock market, you first have to understand what is a stock. Mm-hmm. So a stock is a representation of value or ownership in a company. So if Keaton and Company Limited decided to sell its shares, and let's say you have 100 shares, and Eva buys 1 share from your company, I now own 1/100th of your company. So I have actually own piece of your company. Mm-hmm. What does that ownership mean? Ownership in a company. What does having a stock or a share in a company mean? It means that you have voting rights, so you can vote on certain financial decisions of the company. You have an entitlement to dividends, and dividends is the company sharing its profit with its shareholders, mm-hmm. right? And there are a lot of other different factors and a lot of different benefits that you own in that ownership, right? So now that you have a ownership in a company, you have a stock, the next question to answer is, why would you want to list your company on an exchange? Yes. Or why would you want to go public? And the answer is very simple: to raise money. So basically, the companies, or traditionally companies, will go to the banks to get capital or to get cash to fund the growth or expansionary activities of the company. But the exchange is another pathway to do that. So you list your company, you offer the shares of the company, the investors buy it, and you're able to raise capital from the market to fund expansionary activities of the company. Now, with that, with you listing your shares on the company, on the exchange, that is where the actual role of the stock exchange comes in. Because in order for you to make your company public, it must go on an exchange. Yes. So we asked, what is the role of the exchange? What is the stock market? So that essentially is the role of the stock exchange. It provides a marketplace where you, the company, can now list your shares, and your shares now become publicly traded. So I, as a shareholder of your company, can now trade those shares on the exchange.
Now, I've listened to everything that you've had to say, but you had me at Keaton and Company, something to think about in the future. How does one invest in the TT Stock Exchange?
So it's not really investing in the TT Stock Exchange. It's actually investing in companies that are listed on the stock market. So we have about 34 companies that are public on the Trinidad Stock Exchange. In order for you to participate in that activity, you must open a brokerage account. And we have about 8 licensed brokers in the market. If you go on our website, it would list all the brokers that are available to you. Most of the brokers are affiliated with the main banks, right? So if it is that you already have a bank account, these banks have brokerage arms that you can also participate in. Opening up an account can be a long process, or it can be a simple process, depending on which broker you go to. You may be required to work with certain KYC documents. So it's pretty much very similar to open up a bank account, where you'd have to work with a job letter, utility bills, you know. So, and like I said, it may vary based on the broker that you go to. So I always recommend that you call in advance to see which one, to see what exactly you would need, and to actually see, you know, which one may present an easier process for you. But I think more importantly, the discussion that you're having with that broker, you should talk about not just what do I need to open up an account, but what are the advantages of having an account with you? Yes. What are your fees, right? How does the communication of information flow? Because one of the fundamental reasons for having a broker is the role of that broker in advising you, right? So some of us want advice, some of us don't want advice, but the broker is licensed to give you advice on, okay, you know, what security should I participate in? What are the risks in these particular companies? You know, giving you that advice and that information that you would need to make an informed decision. So it's not done in a willy-nilly way. These advisors are actually licensed by the Security and Exchange Commission, meaning that they have the expertise, they have the knowledge, and they are licensed to give you that financial information. And they will lead you down a path based on the risk profile that you would have, that they will assess you with based on the information that you give them.
A risk profile.
Yeah.
The SME marketplace in particular, small, medium enterprises marketplace, specifically what is that? And what is the role of the TTSE?
Okay, so typically, small companies, right, there's a challenge that small companies face in raising capital to fund the growth of its business. Particularly, these companies were particularly impacted by COVID, for example. These companies, because of their size, they are very vulnerable to cash flow and cash flow needs and cash flow challenges, right? In recognizing that, we at the Stock Exchange partnered with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and we established our SME market in 2012. And the SME market basically allows companies, smaller companies, to list on the exchange and benefit from certain incentives. So for example, If you list your company in the SME market, you benefit from a 10-year tax incentive period. So for the first 5 years after listing, you pay 0% corporation tax, you pay 0% business levy, you pay 0% green fund levy. That's the first 5 years. In the second 5 years after listing, you pay 50% of whatever the prevailing rate. And that's very important and critical, because if a company is experiencing cash flow problems, right, the fact that you don't have to pay taxes, right, actually gives the company the ability to redirect that cash now back into the company and use it for other developmental, more productive purposes. Apart from the tax benefits that you will gain from listing on the SME market, you also have the ability to take a company public, which gives it more visibility. You now allow a wider investor base, which means that when your stock trades, there's a market value that's now assigned to your stock, and it gives, and if it trades properly, the company continues to operate with the best practices and best corporate governance principles, and also the financial health of the company remains strong, you have the opportunity to now go back to market to raise more money, right? And the benefit of that is that it does not in any way reduce the debt profile or deteriorate the debt profile of the company, which is likely the case if you continuously keep borrowing.
Yes.
You understand? Because if you continuously keep borrowing, it's a loan, and you're committing yourself to a monthly installment, right? Obviously, that's cash coming out of the company. If it is that you list on the exchange, you don't have to make that monthly obligation. You can actually use 100% of the money that you've raised and redirect it into the growth of the company.
So it allows, the biggest benefit, I suppose, is that it allows greater sources of financing to expand on one's business.
Correct, yes.
Now, how does one actually, what are the requirements for an SME to actually be listed on the stock exchange?
There are some requirements that the company must meet. So, for example, you must have a particular capital base. So your capital base should be between 5 to 50 million, which is a good thing, because we have some companies that actually operate in Trinidad now that are nearer to the 50 million size, that require additional capital. Right. So what I would say to those companies is, don't wait until you get too big, because the tax incentives will not be there forever. Right. So I will call on companies to take a really hard look and give strong consideration to the incentives. There are also a list of incorporation documents that you would have to submit to us, but more importantly, your shares must be offered via IPO or initial public offering. With that, it means that you have to prepare an offer document, and an offer document called the prospectus. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but a prospectus is basically a document that details the financial information of the company, and it also gives investors some forward-looking prospects of the company, because investors will buy into the company based on the financial prospects. And for small companies, they offer great value, because you have the ability to now invest into the company and grow that company to a more mature company. So actually, investors look at smaller companies that offer more growth potential than obviously more mature, bigger companies, right? So this prospectus document is something that must be created or developed and must be placed in the public domain, so that investors get the opportunity to review the financial health of the company and also review the investment opportunity. In order to do that prospectus or develop that prospectus, the SME company may want to engage a financial consultant to assist, and also a broker who's pretty much familiar with the process to assist with the documents that are required, and also all the other documents that are required for listing at the exchange. What I would want to mention is that we at the exchange try to make the environment as accommodating and as facilitative for the SME companies. So we have relaxed most of our requirements, and we have also looked at a significantly reduced fee for listing so that we are able to encourage more listings in this particular market.
Now, also part of this is a mentorship program
Definitely.
where SMEs have to partner with mentors. Could you please speak a bit more on the mentorship program?
Yes, so the mentorship program was something that we actually put in place last year because we recognize that SME companies need that hand-holding that, you know, will give them the support that they need to take their company from a private company to a public company. And we realized that there was a space and there was a gap there because that support within the ecosystem did not exist, right? So we know you can go to your financial advisor, we know you can go to your bank, you can go to your lawyer, but who is there for me to hold my hand, you know, through that gestation period where I'm a public company and I need to prepare myself to be a private company and I need to prepare myself to be a public company. And the mentorship program is something that we put in place to kind of bridge that gap. So as a small company, you may not be aware of what policies and procedures you need to have in place in order for your business to operate at an efficient level, particularly with respect to corporate governance. And corporate governance is something that's really big for us, especially being a public company. Because in order for you to be a public company, you have to operate with some level of transparency. You have to make certain disclosures, right? Your company is now a public company and you must make your investors comfortable with the operations of your company. So the mentor is that person that will bridge that gap and give the SME company the guidance and the support that they need to ensure that they operate efficiently and effectively, particularly with respect to compliance and with respect to corporate governance.
I'm so sorry, is it mandatory?
It is mandatory.
It is mandatory for an SME to partner with a mentor?
Yes, because as an investor, you would want to make sure that there is someone that is sitting in the company that is sort of your gatekeeper or keeping watch for you in terms of corporate governance standards and principles. And when I say corporate governance standards and principles, I mean, does the company have a board of directors so that there is an independent process to decision making? How does the company make financial decisions? Is it fair and transparent? Does the company always act in my interests as a shareholder? As a shareholder, it gives you that comfort to know that, yes, there is some sort of governance around decision making. There is some governance around fairness and transparency and ensuring that certain principles and standards are maintained throughout the organization.
With regards to this mentorship program as well, can any company be a mentor, or are there certain requirements and standards that they must meet?
So there are some requirements that a mentor must meet. So a mentor can be a person, or a mentor can be a person that's represented, a company that's represented by a person, right? One thing I'd like to highlight is that the SME company can choose its own mentor, or the SME company can choose from a list of mentors that we provide. And these mentors go through a rigorous selection process, approval process. And they're required to submit certain documents that will be supportive of their application. Once they've met those requirements, the stock exchange will issue what we call a no objection letter, and we will post those names on our website. And the SME company is free to choose from the list of names, or if you feel that there is someone who is more suitable and you're more comfortable with, you can actually put forward that person. That person will go through the process, and once that person is successful in the process, then you can appoint that person as a mentor.
Now, there's a lot of information to unpack. You know, in all the research that I did, it's a lot to get into. Where could SMEs get more information as of this, what we're speaking about this morning, the mentorship program, the marketplace?
Yeah, so you can go to our website or follow us on social media. You can talk to any broker, right? Because all of our brokers are pretty much aware of the requirements for listing and the benefits of the SME market. So you can speak to any of our brokers as well. And you can call us at any point in time, and we'll be happy to have that conversation.
wonderful. Ms. Mitchell, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for taking the time to share all this information with us. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Ms. Eva Mitchell, the Chief Executive Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange Limited, speaking about the SME marketplace. We have to take a quick break here on the program. When we return, we'll conclude this morning's proceedings. We'll be right back after this.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Well, just before I leave you this morning, we have a couple more regional updates to share with you, and quite a few important ones actually. Starting with Guyana, nearly 2.5 weeks after the June 12th local government elections were held, the Guyana Elections Commission, or GECOM, is expected to announce the final results. This is according to PPP-nominated GECOM Commissioner Sais Gunraj. Among the reasons for the delay in the official declaration of the results is that the Elections Commission was engaging candidates and parties on recounts. Gunraj also noted that APNU-nominated Commissioner Vincent Alexander has called for a review of the entire process. This update coming from Guyana.
There was the issue also of some recounts. In the municipality of Madhya, there was a request for a recount, which request, I believe, was subsequently withdrawn. So I expect, in short order, a publication of all of those results in the official gazette, including the extracted names of councillors from the proportional representation seats. This issue of a review of the process must be contextualized. After elections are concluded, one would expect that after the conclusion of any national event of this nature, that some sort of report is generated. The law provides the nature of the elections report to be gazetted. As a commission, we expect to have a report from the Chief Elections Officer, who's the head of the Secretariat, and which covers the various aspects of the electoral process. From the 2015 elections, there has been no report. From the 2016 elections, there has been no report. The 2018 elections, there has been no report. The 2020 elections, there has been no report provided by the Chief Elections Officer.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. I thought we would have a bit more to share with some regional updates, but you can stay tuned to AM Prime tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. in order to get more of regional updates. So for now, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a grand day ahead. We are under weather alert. If I'm not mistaken, that hasn't been lifted as yet. But not much rain to report, at least between the east, the north, and the west. Update me throughout the day if you can. Get in contact with us anytime here at WESN Content Capital. But whatever you do, always be safe. Always take your precautions and do whatever you must in order to ensure your safety is there. But for now, take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there.
Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day.
Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back $3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
I's a goat farmer. I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago now.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
I'm Andre L. Batiste, and you're watching WESN, the Content Capital.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content.
WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
A newly released audio recording dating back to 2021 appears to reveal the former U.S. president showing off a highly classified document to visitors at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey.
This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know, we'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified.
Yeah.
Now I can't, but this is
Yeah,
classified.
now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I do.
Trump is under federal indictment for illegally keeping 31 classified national security documents and conspiring with an aide to obstruct government efforts to retrieve them. Among them, the document referred to in the recording, believed to be a plan for a preemptive U.S. attack on Iran, prepared by America's top military official. The newly released audio appears to contradict what the former president told Fox News in an interview last week, that all documents in his possession upon leaving office had been declassified by him, and that he had been referring to newspaper and magazine clippings at Bedminster. The U.S. Justice Department has requested Trump's trial in the case be postponed from August to December.
And back to our top story, with Vladimir Putin having just addressed senior military and security officials in front of the Kremlin. Joining me now from Kiev is Peter Zaumayev, the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Peter, we lost you there to begin with, so I'm going to repeat the question again. Given what we've witnessed over the weekend, is this the case that Vladimir Putin's days are indeed numbered?
It's a guessing game, we can certainly say that his power has suffered a severe blow. I mean, he can hang on in all sorts of configurations as a weakened figure. Remember, Leonid Brezhnev of the Soviet Union was a kind of a consensus figure after Khrushchev, and was, satisfactory to all parties involved because he was considered kind of a pushover, a weakling, and therefore of no threat to anyone. Vladimir Putin may have that role to play in a very much of a diminished state now that he showed that essentially, contrary to what he said at this awarding of the soldiers, there was no loyalty demonstrated to him at all when Prigozhin's army was allowed to march unimpeded through Russian towns and almost reach the outskirts of Moscow within less than a day, with people on the streets of the cities chanting Wagner, Wagner. No one was chanting Putin, and that, I think, speaks volumes about what Russians really